The memory test. The Council's challenge. The Grand Strategic Archive wasn't built for humans. Its crystalline corridors stretched 3 kilometers beneath the surface of Terminus Station, temperature maintained at -40°C because the Memorians who designed it literally froze information into their cellular structure. Most species needed thermal suits just to enter. Dr. Sarah Chen wore a standard jacket and gloves, her breath misting in the air as she followed Archon Thrall deeper into the facility. "You understand the impossibility of what you're attempting," Thrall said, his elongated form gliding across the ice-slicked floor with practiced ease. The Memorian's skin sparkled with embedded data crystals, each one containing petabytes of perfectly preserved military history. In 3,000 years, no species without biological data storage has ever passed the Archive Master examination. Sarah adjusted her tablet, the only piece of technology she'd brought besides her jacket. "That's because you've been testing the wrong thing." Thrall's crystalline features rearranged into what might have been skepticism. "We test memory recall. The foundation of all strategic thinking. Pattern recognition across historical battles. Tactical adaptation based on documented failures. This is not subjective." "No," Sarah agreed. "But it's limited." They entered the examination chamber, a vast circular room where ice walls displayed thousands of holographic battle scenarios simultaneously. Conflicts from across galactic history played out in miniature: fleet engagements, ground assaults, siege operations, ambush tactics. The combined data represented 15 million documented military engagements spanning 2,000 years. 7 examiners waited in the center of the chamber. Thrall joined them, taking his position in the circle. All Memorians, all with enough crystalline data storage to hold every military engagement the galaxy had ever recorded. Together, they represented the most comprehensive military knowledge base in known space. Dr. Chen, the lead examiner, began, his voice resonating through the chamber. "You claim humans can serve as archive masters despite lacking biological data storage. You claim your organic neural networks, which decay and distort information over time, can compete with our perfect preservation systems. This examination will determine if that claim has merit." Sarah set her tablet down on the ice. She wouldn't need it. "I'm ready," she said simply. The first questions. Battle of Threenix 7, the lead examiner stated. Standard opening query. Provide tactical analysis. Sarah closed her eyes briefly, and when she opened them, her voice was steady and clear. Threenix 7 was a naval engagement between the Kreshtar Empire and the Vel Consortium, fought 847 standard years ago in the outer Terminus sector. The Kreshtar committed 43 heavy cruisers and 216 support craft. The Vel countered with 91 destroyer-class vessels using swarm tactics. Outcome, another examiner prompted. Kreshtar victory, but Pyrrhic. They lost 68% of their force, destroying 82% of the Vel fleet. The Kreshtar Empire never fully recovered from the resource expenditure. 3 decades later, they collapsed during the Reformation Wars, primarily because they'd gutted their industrial capacity replacing the ships lost at Threenix 7. The examiners exchanged glances. Perfect recall was expected, they all had that. But Sarah had continued beyond the battle itself, connecting it to consequences decades later. Tactical error? Thrall asked. The Kreshtar Admiral, Vorshin, treated the swarm tactics as a numerical problem. More firepower would equal victory. He was technically correct, but strategically blind. He won the battle and lost the war because he never asked why the Vel chose to fight there in the first place. Why did they? An examiner pressed. Sarah smiled slightly. Because they knew Vorshin would commit everything to win. The Vel weren't trying to defeat the Kreshtar fleet. They were trying to bleed it. Mission accomplished. Silence in the chamber. The holographic displays continued their endless cycle of battles, but the examiner's attention was fixed on the human woman in the inadequate jacket. Siege of Carillon Station, another examiner said, choosing a more obscure engagement. Tactical breakdown. Patterns in chaos. For 3 hours, they questioned her. Obscure battles, famous conflicts, skirmishes that barely rated footnotes in military histories. Sarah answered each one with the same disturbing precision, not just reciting facts but analyzing patterns, identifying mistakes, connecting disparate engagements across centuries. "How are you doing this?" Thrall finally asked, his crystalline structure flickering with confusion. "Our scans show no data storage implants. No neural enhancement. Your brain is completely organic, completely standard for your species. Information should be degrading with each recall, yet your accuracy has been perfect." "Not perfect," Sarah corrected gently. "I don't remember the exact formation positions of the third wave at Keller's stand. I approximated based on standard deployment doctrine of that era. And I mixed up 2 ship names in the Vendors campaign, the hammer and the anvil switched roles in my recollection." "Those are infinitesimal errors," Thrall protested. "Margin of error less than 1% across hundreds of data points." "How?" Sarah walked to the nearest ice wall, where a holographic display showed an ancient battle. "Human forces, actually, the colony wars from Earth's early expansion period." "You're asking the wrong question," she said quietly. "You're asking how I remember all this. But that's not what I'm doing." "Then what are you doing?" the lead examiner demanded. "I'm understanding it." Sarah turned back to face them. "Every battle you've asked me about, I don't just recall the facts. I remember why it mattered. I remember the commander's choices and the soldiers' experiences and the political contexts that made violence seem necessary. I remember the mistakes because I've felt that same kind of mistake in my own life. I remember the victories because I recognize the satisfaction of good planning paying off." She gestured at the displays surrounding them. "You preserve information perfectly, but you preserve it externally. It's stored in your crystalline structure, immutable and exact. When you need it, you access it like reading from a database. Instant, accurate, comprehensive." "Yes," Thrall said slowly. "That is what memory should be." "But it's not what memory is," Sarah countered. "Not for humans. We don't store information, we weave it into ourselves. Every fact I've told you tonight isn't just sitting in my brain waiting to be accessed. It's connected to dozens of other things. Other battles, yes, but also emotions, physical sensations, unrelated knowledge, personal experiences. My memory of 3NIC7 is tangled up with the time I studied it while drinking terrible coffee at 3 a.m. before an exam. It's connected to a conversation I had with my grandfather about industrial capacity in wartime. It's linked to a documentary I watched about Kreshtar cultural attitudes toward honor and sacrifice. The human difference. That's degradation, an examiner said. Contamination of pure data with irrelevant associations. Is it? Sarah pulled up her tablet after all, showing them something she'd prepared. "Tell me about the Battle of Granvik Station." The examiners accessed their data stores. Granvik Station was a defensive engagement. "Stop," Sarah interrupted. "I don't want the battle data. I want to know why it matters." Silence. "You can tell me everything that happened," Sarah continued. "Troop deployments, casualty figures, weapon effectiveness, tactical decisions. But can you tell me what Granvik Station teaches us about modern conflict? Can you tell me which other battles it resembles and why those similarities matter? Can you tell me what mistake the defenders made that I should avoid in future planning?" "That's analysis," Thrall said. "Not memory." "For humans, they're the same thing," Sarah replied. "We don't remember facts in isolation. We remember meaning. Every time we recall something, we rebuild it slightly differently, connecting it to new knowledge, new contexts, new understanding. You see that as corruption. We see it as learning." She walked back to the center of the circle, facing all 7 examiners directly. "Here's what you're missing. Perfect preservation means perfect stagnation. The Battle of 3NIC7 is stored in your archives exactly as it was recorded 847 years ago. Every detail pristine, every fact immutable. But the galaxy has changed since then. Technology has advanced. Tactics have evolved. Species have risen and fallen. Your perfect memory of 3NX7 is a museum piece, fascinating but static. Sarah's voice grew stronger. My imperfect memory of 3NX7 changes every time I think about it. I connect it to new battles, new technologies, new strategic theories. I see patterns across time that your isolated data points can't reveal. I learn from it in ways that perfect preservation prevents. The impossible question. The lead examiner was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, "How many battles are you tracking simultaneously right now?" Sarah blinked. "What do you mean?" "In your mind, at this moment, how many military engagements are you actively processing?" Sarah paused, actually thinking about it. "I'm not sure. Maybe 30? 40? They're all kind of active at once. 3NX7 connects to the Grenvik's defense, which reminds me of the Terran colony wars, which shares tactical elements with the Vel Swarm doctrine, which influenced the Morphean reforms, which led to the development of distributed fleet tactics that we use today, which makes me think about the current border conflicts near." "Stop," the lead examiner said, his crystalline form flickering rapidly. "You're processing 40+ military engagements as a single interconnected system?" "More now that we're talking about it," Sarah admitted. "Maybe 60. They keep connecting to each other." "That should be impossible," Threll whispered. "The cognitive load alone." "Humans are really good at pattern recognition," Sarah said. "We evolved for it. Tracking animal migrations, predicting weather patterns, reading social dynamics in tribal groups. Our brains are designed to find connections between seemingly unrelated data points. You gave us 15 million battles to study, and yeah, that's a lot. But finding patterns in large data sets? That's literally what human cognition does best." An examiner Sarah hadn't heard from yet spoke up. "If what you're describing is accurate, then human memory isn't inferior to our crystalline storage. It's complementary. We preserve perfectly. You adapt constantly. We maintain historical accuracy. You extract evolving meaning." "Yes," Sarah said simply. "Exactly, yes. The real test." "Final question," the lead examiner announced. "Not about any specific battle. About all of them." Sarah waited. "Across 15 million documented military engagements spanning 2,000 years, what is the single most common tactical error?" The chamber fell silent. Even the holographic displays seemed to pause, though Sarah knew that was just her perception. This was the question, the one that separated memorization from understanding. She thought about 3NX7, where victory became defeat because the commander couldn't see past the immediate engagement. About Grenvik Station, where defenders fortified against yesterday's threats instead of tomorrow's. About countless human battles where armies prepared for the last war instead of the next one. "Fighting the battle you prepared for," Sarah said finally, "instead of the battle you're actually in." The examiners didn't respond immediately. Their crystalline structures flickered in complex patterns, internal communication, Sarah realized. They were debating. Finally, Threll spoke. "That answer is not in the archives." "No," Sarah agreed. "It wouldn't be. It's not a fact about any specific battle. It's a pattern across all of them. You can't preserve a pattern in perfect isolation, you can only recognize it by seeing the connections." More flickering. More silence. Then the lead examiner did something Sarah hadn't expected. He lowered himself slightly, what might have been a bow in Memorian body language. "Welcome to the Archive Master Registry," he said quietly. "You are the first non-crystalline species to achieve this rank. The first whose memory changes with each recall. The first who learns by forgetting." "I don't forget," Sarah protested. You remember differently each time," Threll finished. "You rebuild rather than recall. And somehow, that makes your memory more accurate where it matters most, understanding why battles were fought and what they teach us about the future." The memory war. The crisis begins. 6 months after her Archive Master certification, Sarah stood in the Strategic Operations Center aboard Terminus Station, watching real-time battle displays instead of historical recreations. The Jeune Collective had launched simultaneous attacks across 7 border systems, and the situation was deteriorating rapidly. "They're using modified Kreshtar tactics," Admiral Torres said, highlighting troop movements on the main display. "Heavy force concentration, overwhelming firepower at decisive points. Classic dominance strategy." "It's not working," Sarah observed. "Look at their casualty rates." Torres pulled up the data. 63% losses in the first wave. "They're still advancing." "Because they expect us to break," Sarah said quietly. "That's what the Kreshtar tactics are designed for, apply enough pressure and the enemy folds." "But we're not folding." "Should we counterattack?" Torres asked. "The Jeune forces are overextended. We could cut their supply lines, isolate their advance units." "No," Sarah interrupted, her eyes distant. She was seeing patterns, connections across centuries of warfare. "No, that's what they want us to do." Torres frowned. "They want us to attack their exposed flanks? That doesn't make tactical sense." "It makes perfect sense if you're not trying to win this battle." Sarah pulled up historical records on a secondary display. "Pull up the Battle of Threenix 7. Seeing the pattern." "Ancient history," Torres protested. "What does an 847-year-old battle have to do with?" "Everything," Sarah cut him off. "The Vel Consortium used swarm tactics against the Kreshtar Empire. They knew they'd lose. They knew they'd be slaughtered. They attacked anyway because the point wasn't to win the battle. It was to bleed the enemy's resources." Understanding dawned on Torres's face. "The Jeune are bleeding us. Worse. They're baiting us." Sarah's fingers flew across the display, pulling up engagement after engagement, looking for the pattern she knew was there. "Every system they've attacked, look at the locations. Border territories, minimal strategic value, but maximum political visibility. They're trying to provoke us into overcommitting." "Why would they want that?" Sarah found what she was looking for, a battle from 400 years ago, different species, different weapons, but the same underlying strategy. "Because there's a second wave coming. Somewhere else. Somewhere important. And they need us looking the wrong direction when it arrives." Torres stared at the displays. "Where?" "I don't know yet," Sarah admitted. "But I know how to find out. Call the other Archive Masters. All of them. We need to compare patterns." The Memory Council. Within an hour, 6 Archive Masters were assembled via holographic projection in the Operations Center. 3 Memorians, 2 crystalline beings, and Sarah, the only human. "Dr. Chen believes the Jeune attacks are a diversion," Torres explained. "She needs help identifying the real target." Archon Threll materialized in full holographic detail, his crystalline structure shimmering. "What data do you need?" "All Jeune military engagements for the past 200 years, Sarah said. "Not just the major battles. Everything. Skirmishes, border incidents, trade disputes that turned violent. I need to see their pattern of behavior." "That's 17,000 individual incidents," a crystalline archive master named Shard said. "Processing that volume." "I'm not processing it," Sarah interrupted. "I'm understanding it. Send me everything." The data flooded her tablet. Years of military history, diplomatic incidents, territorial disputes. Too much information for any organic mind to absorb directly. But Sarah didn't try to absorb it, she let it wash over her, looking for the feeling of familiarity. "Talk to me about the Jeune culture," she said, scrolling through incidents almost randomly. "Not military doctrine. Culture. How do they think?" Thrall accessed his archives. "The Jeune value patience and long-term planning. Their civilization has existed for 12,000 years with minimal governmental change. They think in terms of centuries rather than years. So they're not impulsive, Sarah murmured. These attacks weren't reactive. They've been planning this for, how long have tensions been building? Approximately 15 years, Torres supplied. Border disputes, trade negotiations breaking down, diplomatic incidents escalating. 15 years, Sarah repeated. Then something clicked. She pulled up a specific incident from 8 years ago, a minor skirmish over mining rights in an asteroid belt. This is where it started. That was nothing, Torres said. 2 patrol ships exchanged fire. No casualties. Both sides apologized. But look at the location. Sarah highlighted the asteroid belt on the star map. It's nowhere near any of the current battle zones. In fact, it's... Her blood went cold. Oh no, she whispered. Oh no, no, no. The hidden target. What? Torres demanded. What did you find? Sarah's fingers trembled as she pulled up more data. The asteroid belt incident. 8 years ago. The Gen were testing our response times in that sector. Then here, she highlighted another incident. 6 years ago, a trade convoy took an unusual route through uninhabited space. We noted it but didn't investigate. And here, 4 years ago, a Gen science vessel requested permission to study gravitational anomalies in what we considered empty space. I'm not following, Shard said. Sarah looked up, her face pale. They're not trying to win border territories. They're trying to draw our fleets away from Nexus Station. The silence that followed was absolute. Nexus Station was the heart of the Alliance's quantum communication network. The hub through which all military coordination, trade negotiations, and diplomatic exchanges flowed. If the Gen could capture or destroy Nexus, they could cripple Alliance response capabilities across hundreds of systems. How certain are you? Torres asked quietly. 80%, Sarah said. Maybe 90%. It's the only target that makes sense for a 15-year build-up. Everything else is theater. They need us looking elsewhere when they strike the real target. Our current force disposition has 3/4 of our fleet engaged in the border conflicts, Torres said, pulling up deployment records. Nexus has minimal defensive coverage because we considered it safe behind the front lines. It's not behind the lines, Sarah said. We've been drawing the lines wrong. Racing against time. Can we redeploy in time? Torres asked the tactical AI. Negative, the AI responded. Minimum 18 hours to pull forces from current engagements and redirect to Nexus Station. Long-range scans show no Gen forces in that sector. They're using stealth, Sarah said. Has to be. Shard, what do your archives say about Gen stealth capabilities? The crystalline being accessed data instantly. Limited. Gen vessels use standard shielding, nothing extraordinary. They've never demonstrated advanced stealth technology. Then they acquired it, Sarah insisted. Or they've been hiding the capability for years, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal it. Think about their culture, patience, long-term planning. They wouldn't launch this operation without a way to approach Nexus undetected. We're scanning all standard frequencies, Torres said. If they're out there, they're not using standard frequencies. Sarah was thinking out loud now, her mind racing through possibilities, connecting dots across decades of military history. Threl, Battle of Moravian Pass, 223 years ago. The defending force thought they had complete sensor coverage, but the attackers approached through a sensor-dead zone caused by natural gravitational interference. Threl accessed the battle instantly. Correct. The Moravian defenders never saw the assault force until it was too late. Nexus Station is positioned near a gravitational anomaly, Sarah said. The same anomaly that Gen science vessel wanted to study 4 years ago. What if they weren't studying it? What if they were testing whether it could hide a fleet? Torres was already signaling the sensor operators. Focus all long-range scans on the gravitational anomaly near Nexus. Maximum resolution. Look for mass displacement, energy signatures, anything that suggests objects moving through the interference field. Seconds stretched. The operations center held its breath. Contact, the sensor operator announced. Multiple contacts. Large mass signatures emerging from the anomaly. Estimate 40+ capital ships, over 200 support craft. They're 3 hours from Nexus Station and accelerating. 3 hours. And their nearest reinforcements were 18 hours away. The impossible defense. We can't get there in time, Torres said, his voice heavy with defeat. Even if we pull every available ship, they'll take Nexus before we arrive. Once they control the communication hub. Then we don't let them take it, Sarah interrupted. Nexus Station itself, what's its defensive capability? Minimal, Torres said. 12 patrol craft, automated defense grid, and the station's own weapons systems. Maybe enough to hold off a dozen attackers. Not 40 capital ships. They only need to hold for 3 hours, Sarah said. Not win. Just survive. Dr. Chen, I appreciate your optimism, but mathematics isn't just about numbers, Sarah finished. It's about strategy. Pull up the defense of Corthian Outpost. Threll's crystalline form flickered. Corthian Outpost was 156 years ago. A small defensive force held against overwhelming numbers by, he paused, understanding dawning. By making the enemy believe reinforcements were imminent. Exactly, Sarah said. The Zhen force thinks they have surprise. They think we're still distracted by the border conflicts. If we can make them think we detected their approach early, that reinforcements are already en route, they might hesitate. Might change their approach to something more cautious. Deception, Torres said slowly. Make them doubt their own intelligence. More than that, Sarah was pulling up more historical battles now, her mind connecting tactics across centuries. We make them fight the wrong battle. They're approaching with overwhelming force because they expect minimal resistance. So we give them the appearance of prepared defense. We reposition Nexus's patrol craft to look like they're part of a larger force. We activate every sensor array in the system, creating the electronic signature of multiple fleets. We transmit fake communications suggesting reinforcements are arriving. The Zhen aren't stupid, Shard objected. They'll see through basic deception. Not if we do it right, Sarah countered. Threll, Battle of Hexamox, 89 years ago. What happened? The attacking force detected what appeared to be defensive fortifications and delayed their assault. By the time they confirmed the fortifications were decoys, actual reinforcements had arrived. Exactly. We don't need to fool them forever. Just for 3 hours. Just long enough to get real forces there. Implementing the plan. What followed was the most intense coordination effort of Sarah's career. Working with the archive masters, she pulled tactical elements from dozens of historical battles, weaving them into a defensive strategy that existed nowhere in standard military doctrine because it drew from 2,000 years of accumulated knowledge. From the Battle of Tyro Station, they borrowed the tactic of false fleet positioning, using decoy signals and sensor reflections to make 12 patrol craft appear as a much larger force. From the Siege of Cartharin, they took the concept of layered deception, creating multiple false narratives so the enemy couldn't determine which was real. From the defense of Terra Nova during humanity's early colonial period, they adapted the desperate improvisation that turned civilian vessels into military assets. Nexus Station is implementing the plan, Torres reported. Every civilian ship in the system has been drafted into the defense force. They're transmitting military-grade signals and maintaining attack formations. The Zhen fleet has slowed their approach. How much time have we gained? Sarah asked. 40 minutes. Maybe an hour if they proceed cautiously. Not enough. Still not enough. Sarah closed her eyes, thinking through every battle she'd ever studied. Every defensive stand, every desperate last effort, every impossible victory snatched from certain defeat. There had to be something else, some tactic they hadn't tried. The Zhen value long-term planning, she said slowly. They think in centuries. This attack, it's not just about taking Nexus. It's about positioning themselves for the next century of galactic politics. Meaning? Thrall prompted. Meaning they can't afford to be seen as aggressors without cause. They need to justify this action to the other Alliance members. Which means, Sarah's eyes snapped open. Which means they need us to fire first. Understanding rippled through the operations center. They're expecting Nexus to defend itself, Sarah continued. To use its weapons systems, to engage their fleet. Once we fire, they can claim self-defense, claim we forced their hand. But if Nexus doesn't fire, if we don't give them that justification, they're exposed. Torres finished. 40 capital ships approaching an unarmed station in neutral space. That's an act of war, and every species in the Alliance will know it. The waiting game. The order went out to Nexus Station, do not engage. No matter what the Jin fleet does, do not fire unless fired upon. Sarah watched the tactical display as the Jin fleet continued their approach, now less than an hour from Nexus. The station's defensive grid stayed silent, weapons charged but holding. The patrol craft maintained their positions, creating the illusion of preparation without taking hostile action. They're slowing again, the sensor operator reported. Fleet velocity decreasing. They're confused. They're recognizing the trap, Thrall said. If they attack an undefended station, they lose all political credibility. But if they withdraw, they reveal that this entire campaign was based on deception. 45 minutes from contact. 30 minutes. The Jin fleet continued to slow, their formation becoming less aggressive, more uncertain. 15 minutes. Multiple hyperspace signatures, the sensor operator suddenly announced. Alliance reinforcements arriving in the Nexus system. 20 heavy cruisers, 40 destroyers, and, he paused, double-checking his readings. The Concordance itself. The Alliance flagship is entering the system. Sarah let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The Jin fleet is breaking off, Torres reported. They're withdrawing toward the border. Victory. Not through overwhelming force or superior firepower, but through understanding patterns, recognizing the real objectives, and using historical knowledge to predict behavior. Lessons learned. 3 days later, Sarah stood in the same examination chamber where she'd earned her Archive Master certification. The 7 Memorian examiners were there again, along with Shard and a dozen other Archive Masters from across the Alliance. We owe you an apology, Dr. Chen, the lead examiner said. When you claimed human memory was equally valuable to our crystalline preservation, we accepted it intellectually. But we didn't truly understand until we watched you work. You connected patterns we couldn't see, Thrall added. Because we store each battle as an isolated data point, perfectly preserved but ultimately separate. You stored them as interconnected knowledge, constantly learning from the relationships between them. That's what human memory does, Sarah said. We forget details, yes. We introduce errors, we blend memories, we reconstruct rather than recall. But in doing so, we find patterns. We learn. We adapt. Your memory changes with each war, the lead examiner observed. Every new conflict adds connections, modifies understanding, creates new insights from old knowledge. And yours doesn't, Sarah replied gently. Your perfect preservation means perfect stasis. The Battle of 3-7 is stored exactly as it happened 847 years ago. But I learned something new about 3-7 3 days ago, when I saw the Jin using similar resource bleeding tactics. My memory of that ancient battle is now connected to this modern conflict, which means next time I think about either one, I'll understand both better. Shard's crystalline form shimmered with what might have been amusement. So human memory is superior because it's imperfect? Not superior, Sarah corrected. Different. Complementary. You preserve the facts we need to know. We extract the lessons we need to learn. Together, we create something neither of us could achieve alone, a living military history that's both accurate and adaptive. The new standard. The Alliance Military Council met the following week to discuss reforming the Archive Master Program. For 3,000 years, only species with biological data storage had been admitted. Now they were debating whether to open the program to all species, regardless of how their memory worked. The concern, a Crystalline Council member said, is quality control. If we allow species with imperfect memory to serve as archive masters, how do we ensure historical accuracy? By doing what Dr. Chen did, Admiral Torres replied. Pair them with crystalline archive masters. Let one preserve the facts while the other extracts the patterns. Create teams instead of individuals. We're also proposing something else, Sarah added. Human military academies have always emphasized studying historical battles. Not just memorizing them, understanding them. Debating them. Learning from them. We want to share that methodology with the Alliance. She activated a holographic display showing a classroom full of cadets, humans, Memorians, crystallines, and a dozen other species, all discussing an ancient battle, arguing about decisions, proposing alternative strategies. This is how humans have always approached military history, Sarah explained. Not as a database to access, but as a conversation to join. Every student brings their own perspective, their own insights, their own ability to see patterns. And through that conversation, we learn things that no individual memory, perfect or imperfect, could discover alone. The council was quiet for a moment. Then the lead Memorian delegate spoke. 3,000 years ago, our ancestors created the Archive Master System because we believed perfect preservation was the key to military excellence. Dr. Chen has shown us we were half right. Preservation matters. But so does adaptation. Memory matters. But so does meaning. He paused, his crystalline structure flickering in complex patterns. I move that we reform the Archive Master Program to include all species, regardless of memory type. And I further move that we establish Dr. Chen's teaching methodology as the standard for all Alliance military academies. The vote was unanimous. 6 months forward. Sarah stood in her classroom at the new Alliance Military Academy, looking out at 200 cadets from 40 different species. Some had perfect crystalline memory. Some had organic neural networks that forgot details but remembered meaning. Some had collective consciousness that shared memories across multiple bodies. Some had memory systems that hadn't even existed when the Archive Master Program was created. Today's lesson, she announced, is about the Battle of Threenix 7. Some of you can access perfect records of every detail. Some of you will only remember the broad strokes. Some of you will forget half of what I'm about to tell you by tomorrow. She smiled at them. And all of that is perfect. Because we're not here to memorize battles. We're here to understand them. To find patterns. To learn from the past so we can adapt to the future. Your memory, however it works, is exactly what we need. She activated the holographic display, and an 847-year-old battle began to play out in the center of the classroom. Now, Sarah continued, who can tell me why the Vel Consortium chose to fight a battle they knew they'd lose? Hands, appendages, and sensory organs rose throughout the classroom. Every species had a different perspective. Every memory system revealed different patterns. And through their collective conversation, they would discover insights that no individual, no matter how perfect their memory, could find alone. That, Sarah thought, was the real lesson. Not that human memory was better or worse than crystalline preservation, but that every type of memory revealed different truths. And the galaxy was big enough, complex enough, to need them all.